Hello, I'm Kara Dahl Russell. We continue our After the News at Noon series for Women's History Month, Courtly Love and the Cult of the Virgin, today discussing the daily life of the Lady of the Castle, or A Lady's Home is Her Castle, subtitled Running the Corporation, Power, Privilege, and Imprisonment. We've mentioned how the real job of castellans around the year 1000 was war, whether it was an actual war, a hunting party, or these early extended free-for-all jousts that were, for all practical purposes, just a war whose only cause was keeping the knights in shape for another real war. The menfolk were often away. Now, remembering that marriages were arranged at an early age, and especially within the rank of nobility or castellans, marriages were contracts for land, power, prestige, and to solidify alliances, it's quite possible that the lady of the castle was happy to have the man in question far afield. I won't go so far as to suggest that she would actually want him dead, because that situation would raise up innumerable unpleasant specters for the lady of the castle, but to have him far away could be a very pleasant arrangement indeed. Even when the Lord was at home, a woman's world, as we mentioned before, was a thing set apart. For the most part, in the early years around 1000, a woman stayed in her room or rooms for a majority of the time. This was the world of women. Ladies in attendance, seamstresses, populated her world. There were very prescribed social norms as to which men, if any, could come into the lady's chamber. Even males in her extended family would rarely enter this sanctum, so it is easy to see how this could quickly become a gilded cage. It is also easy to see how women raised in this kind of environment might find it a very natural and comfortable alternative to become a nun. That said, we have mentioned that in this time period, women were, although still legally and socially set apart, starting to have certain spheres of influence, and if we dare not call it power, we can at least call it a degree of self-determination. With the men away, the lady of the castle became the representative of the man and literally the keeper of the keys. With the men away so often, this position of keeper of the keys became so closely identified with women that they became called chatelaines. The chatelaine is the name of a large key ring that held the household keys and became a name for the woman who held the keys. In later days, when the mark of being a rich lady meant to be idle and decorative, the head housekeeper would have been the chatelaine, which explains the degree of power, trust, and influence that the position came to hold. We see on Downton Abbey how long that position retained its importance. With the men away and being the keeper of the keys, it meant that the daily world of a woman became much larger. With attendants, she would make rounds, check supplies, and in the course of these duties would effectively become the interim CEO of a castle and surrounding areas that were comparable to being a mayor or a governor today. The lord of the castle did not just own the lands, but also adjudicated justice, so this too fell more and more to the lady chatelaine. As all this came to be seen as more regular, it was only natural that by the 1200s we began to see these ladies acting as regent for young children who have come to power and ownership. It also explains why this lady looked so exalted, so intelligent, so powerful, and so untouchable as to be worthy of unrequited love. Composed at the turn of the 1900s, this piece by Gabriel Fauré evokes these medieval days with an interesting double meaning in its title. Une châtelaine en sa tour can literally mean a chatelaine in her tower, as in locked in her tower room, or it can mean doing her rounds. While the spinning circular music could initially be interpreted as pacing and turning in a small confined world, while listening, we come to feel the freedom within the wheels. For any of us who have daily duties, they can indeed feel confining, a never-ending, repeated task. But in this music, we can also hear and feel the freedom of being able to do these things in our own time, to be efficient one moment, then to linger at another, to quickly attend to one thing, then meander for a bit. I feel this makes this work supremely effective at creating the picture of the lives of these women, whose lives were very prescribed, but also much more free than the average woman of that day. It is worth mentioning, too, that the repetitive musical patterns in this piece were part of a groundbreaking movement in music in the early 1900s, and that into the 1960s and beyond, composers like John Cage and Morton Feldman were still exploring these worlds of musical minimalism.